If you're talking about man on the basis of just his physical life, if he could have such a thing with almost minimal intellectual activity, at the physical level, captivity is just an irrelevant point. If you're sane, you're captive. You're captive of the body, you're captive with eating nourishing food, getting the right amount of sleep, etc. So, if we'll assume that we are now, the people who are here and hearing this, and almost the entire world, that now your immediate problem, what would seem to be the difficulties in life, are not physical. Because even if you say, well, it is physical because me being overweight drives me crazy, that's here. That is not on your hips. That's here. Because if you didn't have this, you wouldn't know whether you were overweight or not. If you didn't have this, you wouldn't know cellulite from Cleveland. The truth, quite simply, is just get to it. You've got to see this or not. Other than the fact, let's assume, anybody hearing this, that you are not starving, you're not homeless. Because if you are under present day conditions, you're not just starving and homeless, you're stupid. I mean, you can't even find your way down to a government office. We're all paying taxes. Go down there and you won't be hungry. So you understand. It is simply that in our day and time, this part of the world, physical problems are not your problem. The difficulties in life are something else. And the difficulties in life now, may I be so bold as to suggest, come from the brain. That's it. And I don't mean, of course, that you have some genetic neural problem. But whatever you consider to be a problem in life, I don't care what it is, one more time, assuming you're not starving, you're not freezing to death, we're not talking about that. Because, that's going to get you sooner or later anyway. Why are you whining? If you're just worried about that, well, I'm a little overweight, or, I have this terrible case of Gruber's syndrome that comes on me about once a year. Why in the world would anybody worry about that? You don't sweat that, you'll be dead. Sooner or later you'll die, so forget that. That is not a problem. Any problem that a civilized man has arises from here. Of course, what arises from here originally came from the body, because everything it's thinking is always an ante. A-N-T-E. That a man cannot think of something that did not arise from the body. That's just, he can say he's thinking about esoteric matters or religious matters or artistic matters, but the mind cannot simply make up something. But here's the part that men cannot face because they're not supposed to, and they wouldn't get anywhere with it. It's why we keep trying to come up with new terms and call it independent thinking or nonpartisan thinking. Because it's not that what you're doing now is wrong, or an ordinary person. What ordinary people are doing is all they can do. But anything you consider to be a problem, all of the injustice in the world, all of the injustice directed toward you, all of your emotional problems, the kind of things that hurt you so deeply that it almost makes you want to write a country and western song. The kind of things that will drive you down to the corner bar and make you drink when you know you don't want to. Or maybe just do 2 or 3 more lines just tonight just to get you through the weekend, and you don't want to. The problems are from here. We are not talking about, to remind you, we're not talking about people who are, by any ordinary definition, emotionally or intellectually ill. We're talking about ordinary, middle-class, sane, backbone of society, civilization people. But they have problems. If they're alive, they consider they have problems. But the problems seem to become more and more of a sophisticated nature. But there is a dastardly little trick built into this, is what that machine, that's a wonder, by the way. But it says that those who believe their captivity is due to some single specific cause have become prisoners twice over. That just about takes in everybody. The religious say that the cause is evil forces, or Satan, Lucifer, whatever. People who would have more of a psychological bent on their psychology as opposed to a theological view of psychology, they would say that their problems, you come from a single source, unconscious traumas or subconscious problems. As long as you believe that there is a single cause somewhere, and you do not have to be so backward as to say, well, all human problems do have a single source, and it's the downfall of man at the Garden of Eden, let's say. In other words, it's Satan, it's Lucifer, it's an evil force. Let's say that you're beyond that, so that you don't think that there is just one single cause of all problems. But so you don't miss the point. The ordinary mind, if you get past this overall view and you get down to whatever it is that a man says, well, I do have this inclination to drink. I don't know what it is. He would say, even if he didn't know what it was, if you said, well, what do you think the cause is? He would, if you just asked him the right way, if he would not go so far as to put his exact finger on it, he would say, well, whatever it is, there is a cause for it. Because I am not an idiot. I am not just some common drunk. My God, I finished college. So he's obviously not a common drunk. But if he said, I do consider drinking a problem, I don't know what's happened to me, it's just, you know the conversation, the terminology nowadays, it's that alcohol in some way has become like an evil force, that alcohol now in some way has come into his life, got into his room, into his house, it follows him around. But he's sophisticated. The man's an agnostic. Or even maybe an Episcopalian for all I know. And he doesn't believe in Satan, but now he talks about addictions, which sounds better. But he is saying now that he will admit, I have some sort of problem. But even if he couldn't put his finger on it, the point being I want you to see is men are still wired up. It's the nature of the energy running the mind, is they will believe, even if they can't identify it, they would believe and say, if you put it to them the right way, that whatever the cause is, it is a cause. That is, there is some specific cause. Of course, it could be, the man could speculate, or I'll speculate for him. He could say, I don't remember this because it was probably my childhood, but my father ran off and left when I was 6 months old. But I have heard stories from my grandmother that my father, my real physical father, was just an absolute drunk. And that he beat up on my mother, and they said that even when I was 5 months old, I screamed and cried when he'd come in the room. So by God, that don't sound right? So I'm going to speculate for him, all right? And he might say, well, that sounds right. That's the sort of thing that does cause my kind of problem. If you believe that there is, whatever it is, that there is some single cause for whatever you call your problem, any problem you have, you are the biggest carp. No offense to you fish lovers, but the point is, for a human to believe that, you have been hooked. And I mean, you opened your mouth and you swam. I mean, you called for somebody, a priest or a rabbi or a psychiatrist. Somebody hooked me. Here I am. I drink too much. I'm angry. I overeat. I can't get along with women or men, or I don't like my family. And you're saying, come here, somebody, quick. Put something in my mouth so that when somebody says, why do you do this? I can go, aha. Ordinary people, of course, are not supposed to get over their so-called problems because, from a more expansive view, their so-called problems are not problems. It's just being alive, spelled in a funny way. They've shortened the term from being alive to problems, I guess. Maybe they're trying to save time, and it's easier to spell, maybe. But they're not actually problems, and so men are not supposed to get over them. But let's take a kind of fictitious person who says that they do want to get over them, that they do not like living intellectually like they are, or however they explain it, or they wish that they could be civilized a second time over. They wish they could find a new promised land. They wish they could go into some new area inside of their own brain. Let's just say somebody says that. If they are in some way sincere, what I want you to consider is they can't get anywhere as long as they believe well, it's a whole little menu here, but it's all tied together, that they do have problems and they need to get over the problems, which just seems to be the only sane view to take. If a man said, I believe it's possible to have some greater degree of consciousness or awareness. I believe that, I just believe that. And you say, well, I'm proud of you, sir. And you say, well, I assume you're pressing on with it. And the man says, well, I would at any moment now, except I seem to have these, here it comes. I seem to have several problems I have to get past first. That, you could say, in the simplest form, is the first thing on the menu. And that, by the time somebody gets to be somewhere between the age of 18 months and 18 years, they look at that on the menu, they chew on it several times, and the brain, the patterns harden once and for all, and you don't have to worry about solder getting in your brain. You're wired, and that's it. That you decide, that I like. I thought I liked egg rolls, but hey, this is even better. Because if you got problems, there it is, you're only, let's say, 18, you can coast. What's 18 from 72? You got 40 years or more, now you can just coast. Because anybody comes up to you and says, I assume that you're fighting the good fight in life. And you go, oh, by God, am I? But because you know the problems I have. All we got to do is look on the menu. Are you alive? Yes. Well, I have a problem. So the first thing usually is I've got a problem. Then the second one is I have got to cure it. And then the part that is not normally taken into account is what I had the magic box put out, is even if you tried to get past somewhere those two beginning entry-level items on the menu of being alive, and of course having problems, is that, all right, I got problems and I got to get over them, I'll never get anywhere. I can't ever reach some kind of greater state of consciousness, not as long as I'm drinking. I'm like ignoring the obvious. You know, I'll never have some kind of great cosmic thoughts as long as I beat up on women. You know? Well, it's a good thing that Henny Youngman and Freud's dead, so that somebody don't tell the man the obvious. This thing looks way too, I don't know, up close and point blank. What is that? I don't see any decorations on it. As long as you believe that there is a single cause for a problem, the way that the machine put it out the first time with my help was that you're captive twice. So, figure of speech, a little verbal dramatics to point out that not only is there no chance of you ever getting free, there's no chance of you ever getting free times two. Well, we pointed out enough, I assume that some of you can get the picture without any criticism involved, that none of human institutions, simply being man magnified, but that none of the institutions such as religion or psychiatry can, perforce of what they are. They cannot perform and succeed in their professed profession. And on a sane day, they will admit it. That, no, we cannot succeed. There's no such thing as perfection. But then there's even a more subtle grain within this, is what I was trying to get you to consider, that if there was any chance of getting past that, such as, all right, a man who says, well, I'm going to get past religion, that I am no longer tied to that being the problem. I'm not anti-religious, but that's not the problem. And then let's say he moves ahead within his own nervous system, the history of his own self. And he gets into psychology, psychiatry. And then he gets past that. Well, I'm not anti-psychiatry, but that's not it. Me worrying about some kind of subconscious problems making me drink or beat up on people or being mad, no. There's something else. So if a man here and there could get past that point, he would then be running the dangerous possibility, so to speak, of him actually getting intellectually more independent, which life is not arranged for that to happen. The built-in, more subtle level I was trying to get you to consider is what we're talking about, is even if a man here and there got to that far, that he decided life out here is not the problem, not the way I've been accepting it, not the way everybody, not the way that all sane civilized people say it is, that all sane people say that if you've got personal problems, which I do, then there's some cause for it. You weren't just born, your mind kind of screwed up. I mean, that's obvious. You were born just a nice little pristine blank brain baby if you didn't have any neural problems physically. So, there is some cause for me being like I am. But if you got past the point of the general causes, which are normally considered, or as I was putting them to you, as theological and psychological, then if you got past that, like, well, that doesn't answer anything. I'm not mad about it, but I considered enough, it struck me finally that religion's not the problem. It's not evil forces made me like this. Plus, it's not my family, it's not my peers, it's not subconscious. There's something else going on here. So if a man here and there got that far, and let us say that he was indicative of perhaps a whole growing bunch of people behind him about to do it, which life has really no need for. One or two people, life doesn't give a damn. But let's say he was about to represent a little growing pimple, movement, possibility. The built-in safeguard is this. Even if a man goes that far, which many men have, just go check in the Dewey Decimal System and ask, what the hell happened to Dewey? Inside the philosophy parts, and you'll find people, sometimes even in the metaphysical, but especially in the philosophy, that they get to the point, because it was the intellect trying to get past religion originally, the nervous system expanding a little bit. But if a man gets far enough that he says, all right, religion's not the answer, and it's not the problem, and psychology, that is, there's some kind of unconscious psychological traumas in me making him, it's not that, then he would be getting dangerously close, again, if he represented some kind of mass movement, if he was representative of millions of people. But the thing that holds it back is even if he gets that far, he still thinks there is a cause. Now, he may pass for being exceptionally philosophical and reflective at the ordinary level. That is, if you say, all right, what is the cause? And he'll go, hey, now I'm not going to overplay my hand, because I'm going to tell you the truth. I do not know what it is. I know it's not religion. I know it's not evil forces make me do it. And I just know that it's not subconscious traumas, and it's not my parents' fault. No, they were as hairy and weird as I am, but that can't be it. And you say, okay, well, what is it? No, I'm not going to tell you I know, but I've spent a lifetime now meditating, reflecting. I tried drugs and this and that, and I know that those two are not it. But you hear the built-in safeguard. All you got to do is ask the right way, and you'd say, all right, so you're not going to be so pretentious to tell me that you know. No, I'm not. But you do know that there is a cause. What's an ordinary man? Anybody. What can they say? They're going to have to say, well, certainly there is a cause. I mean, I didn't just happen like this. Life got no need to worry. They don't have to post a guard at your door. Because all you got to think is there is a cause. Now, you wouldn't necessarily, if I was talking to this man and trying to represent his life's best interest, you wouldn't have to necessarily make him say, all right, when I say a cause, I mean a singular sole cause. You don't have to rub his face in it, but that's what he means. And don't worry about him. Ask you. If there is a cause for something, the article, is not plural. You can say, oh, well, don't play around with rhetoric. I'm not. That's simply the way the mind works. So you don't know what caused you to have your personal problems, no. But you do know there is a cause. I mean, we're almost at the level of being ridiculous with a sane person, because he's going to say, well, certainly there's a cause. I just don't know what it is yet. I've narrowed it. I know what it's not. You say, but there is a cause. Well, sure there's a cause. Do you understand? You're done for. You are a happy captive. Happy captive, even perhaps with a contract to write a book on philosophy. Bringing up a point blank wall again. It's too early in the show to be point blank, isn't it? What would happen to every human problem if you didn't talk about it? That is almost so point blank that people can't even hear any validity to it. Because you've already talked about it. An ordinary mind cannot erase itself. And if you in some way could get an ordinary person to hear a piece of that, about the best they could do is where we were hitting at a little bit last time, is the ordinary mind would want to say, well, you're just saying that you're trying to walk away from your problems, and you can't do it. Even though I'm not a great follower of psychology, we all know you just can't. If you got a problem, well, you can't walk away from it, and they can come up with their own metaphors. If your house is burning down, what are you going to do? You drive up to your driveway and you see your house is on fire, and you go, well, I'll drive around the corner and I'll wait a while, and my house won't burn down. You can't do that. You got to face your problems and work them out. Well, I just talked myself out of it. I was going to attempt to shade the difference a little bit more, that it was not just where we were last time about that psychology and by now just sort of collective wisdom of people tells you that even if a man says, I am not a great believer in contemporary or professional psychology and psychiatry, but I agree you cannot simply walk away from a problem. If you're sick, if you broke your leg, just by saying, well, I don't believe in medicine, conventional medicine, so I won't go to a doctor. I mean, your leg's still going to be broken. So if you got a problem, even if you're not sure what, you can't ignore it. What we're talking about tonight is even a more subtle shaving of that, because it's not that you just ignore the problem. You admit that there's a problem if you're ordinary, that there is something holding me back, there's something making me what I am, and it's somewhere. If I can find it, if I can locate it. But you understand that's the same thing as saying you can't walk away from your problem. Because if you believe there's a problem, you can't ever find it, there's no danger you walking away from it. Do I have to type another one? Or the machine already put out a couple. And surprise upon surprise, I think they're sort of all connected. I won't put you through the machine again because I think it overheated anyway. But the other two that were related to it says, whenever an independent mind hears life count to two, it will, with no further consideration and just on general principles, immediately itself go to three, if not four. Another one said, to be alive is to be injured if you're insulted to think as you do. I won't be so bold as to even claim that anybody would have ever thought to put it that way. But anybody who has what they call any sort of personal problem, which is everybody alive, and the more alive and sophisticated and educated and modern they are, the more they have those kind of problems. To be alive is to be injured if you're insulted to think as you do. Any sort of what ordinary people call personal problems is based upon them being insulted to think as they do. If you'd like, I'll agree one more time if I didn't make it clear in the intro to that page. I agree that no sane, ordinary person would ever put it that way. But that is what all psychological, personal, emotional problems are with people, is they are literally, without knowing it, they're insulted to be thinking like they think. And they call it all sorts of things after that. Well, my mind drives me crazy. I have unusual thoughts. I have biased, prejudicial ideas that just jump into my mind. I have hatreds for people that just come out. Just sometimes I can control it and I don't say anything, but boy, inside it's driving me crazy. Since we don't have the patient here in person, may I read his diagnosis one more time? To be alive is to be injured if you're insulted to think as you do. What everybody else calls either somewhere between sin and shame, taking the view all the way from religion being an older part of the human nervous system collectively, and perhaps in your case or somebody's case individually, let that be sin, into the area of shame, which would be the psychological version of sin. That covers, not to argue words, but that covers all forms of human problems that you either feel according to how religious you are at any particular time or how psychologically inclined you are, that you either feel that you are sinning or else you feel that you're ashamed. But what is it based on? It's really based on, from a more direct intellectual view, is you're insulted to be thinking as you think. And therefore you're injured, and you call it a problem. From the ordinary view, we've got always, well, I'm sure most of you can do it, to give credit to life and to point out the obvious, that ordinary people are not injured, ordinary people are not insulted, ordinary people are alive. Ordinary people are playing out their role, but I'm just offering you an alternative description of what's going on. So if you're alive and you think in the ordinary way, which it doesn't matter what it is, if you're thinking other people's thoughts, which if you're ordinary, that's all you'd think, then you feel injured. And thus you have what we started out admitting, that everyone has personal problems of some nature. But it's based upon you being insulted to think as you think. There was, I guess, sort of a form of prescription after the diagnosis here. To be alive is to be injured if you're insulted to think as you do. Thus, which I guess is the prescription, there is no way out, and just about every way imaginable. Which surely that would fit into the world's most useless prescription, would it not? That if you're ordinary and you think as you think, and you don't know how it happened, you don't know where to lay the blame, but you think as you think, and you're insulted to be that way, you're injured, you're not satisfied with it, then if that be true and you don't know what caused it, then what the hell, there's no way out, except for this. There is no way out, and it's underlined, as a matter of fact, trust me, it's underlined. There is no way out, and just about every way possible. Is that not just an absolute earth-shaking revelation for ordinary people? So there's no way out, which many people would immediately buy into that. But what if there's almost every possible way imaginable out? Which, of course, seems to be the absolute antithesis of no way out. But then if you thought about every possible way, what does that do to the ordinary mind? What do they make of that? You mean besides nothing? Yeah, nothing. What does it tell you? You mean, if there's in some way that you could make some great announcement, or if you begin to see it yourself, that at the ordinary level, you are intellectually captive. Any idea of freedom is just foolish. And that there was no cause for it that you could identify. Let's assume that you got past religion and ordinary notions of psychology. In other words, other people's thinking. It's not that religion and psychology is wrong. It's just that anything that anybody else thought, if you still think that'll get you out of where you are, watch out for flying elephants. So what if you could take that sort of immediate view, that it maybe even hit you on your own, that wait a minute, if all this be true, then it's as bad as some people may have imagined, or as I thought once or twice. God almighty, there is no way out. We are absolutely captive, and that's it. Okay. Then what if that have affected you in such a way that you went, hey, that has some possibility. And the doctor here said, wait, that's not all of it. That there is no way out, dash, and, underlined, and almost every way imaginable. Just on the verbal basis, if you was taking any of this seriously, you would say, well, wait a minute, this is worse than the IRS giveth and the IRS taketh away. Because at first I was going to buy into you pointing out that there is no way out. Because I've even had that suspicion. There's just no way out. And almost every way imaginable. You could at first, if you were putting some faith in this or trying to consider it, go, well, now we've got just the opposite. We've got a whole new ball game. Except what's the mind going to do with that? To say every way possible. Almost any way imaginable is a way out. It cannot fit, not so long as you believe that there is a cause for you being like you are. That there is a cause for the way I think. Because if there is a cause, you can't even compute. You can't even get it to work into the wiring to say, well, then the cure for it is this. Well, it's two possibilities. I'll give you two prescriptions. I mean, there's a cause for, you're sure there's a cause. There's some reason that you think that you are personally as you are. Well, certainly. All right. You can't change it. There's no way out, okay? And there's almost every possible way imaginable out. The first one people will go for. Because they might even want to grab a sheet and try to replay stoicism or fatalism and go, well, I knew it. But then you pull the sheet out from under them and say, wait a minute. The first part said there was no way out. The second part said, and almost every way imaginable. What could you do with that? It's like having a prescription that no matter how you look at it, no matter which way you turn it, no matter where you look, it appears to reflect wherever you're looking. Mm-hmm. How about a world, if you were religious, how about a world of infinite gods? How about a world of infinite, absolutely infinite, possible rituals of salvation? Or if you were psychological instead of theologically psychological, then it would be anytime you laid on a couch and whatever you said would cure you, whatever that means. You could go to any psychiatrist in the world, whether he spoke your language, whether he was awake, whether he was alive. All you had to do was lay down and say, God, it's hot. And suddenly, whenever an independent mind hears life count to 2, it will, with no further consideration, just on general principles, immediately go to 3, if not 4. What keeps the human mind believing that there is a cause for you being like you are? If it's not theological, if it's not religious, not psychological, it is due to the laws of physics. And that is that the mind, that the energy that runs the mind can only count to 2. And therefore there's got to be a reason for everything. Well, don't there? Doesn't there? If there's not a reason for everything, then everything that happens is caused by everything else. I mean, something makes water boil. Something makes a picture of Newton fall when you let it go. It is, from any routine intellectual view, it is somewhere this side or just past insane to deny the fact that something causes everything. So we're not going to stop and waste time debating that on the physical, chemical, electrical level. Forget science for a second. It is still applicable to humans, just what we're talking about. That it's just as sane, it is just as serious, just as scientific to take the kind of approach to say, all right, however you are, there's got to be some sort of reason that causes that, as much as there's a reason that causes something to fall when you let it go, something that causes heat to rise, and you say yes. even if I do not know what it is, and even if psychology is not as scientific as physics as of yet, then yes, that's true. There's something that causes it. What if there's not? Should we set some sort of game, like talk maybe for X amount of minutes, like speculate and what if? And then the last 5 or 10 minutes just go, well, you know, what the hell, they can't arrest us. What would you do with your own psychology? What would you do with your own mind if it were true that nothing specific causes anything? What could you do? At the physical level, it's irrelevant again. It'd be foolish to even deal with it because you would simply be interfering with your own health. That eating the right food does seem to cause you to survive. Getting the right amount of sleep under the right kind of atmospheric conditions, the right temperature, seems to be conducive to you fighting another day. But what if beyond that level, into the world that is uniquely man in your experience, the world of this, that no one can put their hand on what causes men individually, forget collectively for a minute, but no one can put their hand on what causes somebody to be like they are. And you and your parents and everybody else, you have had now 5 or 6 or God knows how many, thousands of years. You tried to blame it on gods. You tried to look into the skies and look into volcanoes and climb down in caves. And then you tried to climb in people's brains. And then you tried to tell them, all right, we got plenty of time. Tell me everything that ever happened to you up until now. And you think, Jesus, I'm 38 years old and this is costing $200 an hour and I got to tell you everything that ever happened. Well, yes, how else are we going to find? You've tried everything. What would you do if you could do it? With the information, if you saw it and somebody could just put your face right there and you realize that the reason, the obvious reason, that no one can figure out what causes men to be like they are is because there is no cause. There is not a cause. What would you do with it if it were true? Nothing. Look off. That would probably be the most charitable thing that an ordinary man would do. An ordinary man, if he heard, he'd go, that's a bunch of crap. But I could, and I will point out that there is a way in which to say that almost anybody on this planet is more intelligent than a person of a more independent mind. Truly. Because almost anybody on this planet knows that things are not that simple. And if anybody insinuated they were, you take anybody on this planet, and they would almost want to laugh you off the planet. Like, are you serious? I mean, you're a grown person and you seem to be, well, semi-literate, probably had some degree of schooling, yes. Are you actually trying to say that there is no specific cause that makes a man like he is? I mean, are you trying to say that at all? Because by then you should give it up anyway. But they're too smart for that. What if also, if we're still going to play what if men have to believe that their life, individually and human life, is more complex than it is? What if you have to believe that? What if there is a reason? Maybe we can back it up a little and it'll strike you in a different way. What if there is a very good reason, it has nothing to do with psychology, that has to do with life protecting itself, that there is a very, very good reason that men believe, and it's not due to psychology, it's not psychology's fault any more than religion in a different way, that men have got to believe that things are not as simple as that. That people have to believe that, hey, if you're alive and you're a right-thinking person, that you're human at all, you can't walk away from problems. You can't look at the injustice in the world. You can't look at the injustice in you. Now admit it, don't you sometimes have prejudicial and angry thoughts toward people? Well, yes, I do. Well, you can't just walk away from that. And the whole world goes, well, you're right. It's complex. It is so complex that the more complex an average man is, the less he's agreeable to even insinuate that he might understand what's going on. Because, the admission past a certain level of your ignorance is prima facie evidence for most civilized people of how intelligent you are. Oh, well, yes, I majored in psychology, but hell, yes, I am a doctor, I am a psychiatrist, but I'm going to tell you the truth. When it gets right down to it, us in the field of psychiatry, when it gets right down, we don't really know a lot more than just a layman like you about what specifically causes a man to be like this. And you're impressed if you're ordinary, because he'll say, well, we do studies. I mean, how can we explain human nature? We take two brothers in the same household. The father was a drunk. He was there all the time. They were exposed to the same things, and one of them turned out to be a minister, a teetotaler, a decent guy. Another son turns out to hold up 7-Eleven stores, a drunk. And so the psychiatrist says, there are just some things we can't explain, which sounds to be more sophisticated and more progressive than a priest saying, well, God works in mysterious ways. Sometimes he lets people that try to do right, he lets them succeed. But I've seen families, and he'll give you the same scenario of two brothers, and one of them went to the priesthood, and the other one, became a bank robber. He goes, what do we know? The admission of ignorance, once you reach a certain level, is taken as evidence of intelligence. And worse than that, though, jump back where we were. What if somebody jumped into this little cocktail party with a priest and psychiatrist and all them admitting, well, we don't really know, and the guy in some way could get their brains to look in a certain way and said, well, what if the reason you don't know is not due to your shortcoming or your profession's shortcoming? What if there is no reason? You have moved the level of people being ignorant about what's going on. You have moved it into an area now that not only can they not dance to it, they can't even figure out that they're in the same ballroom. But you understand? Because the brain can't really handle that at ordinary level. But if it could, it has done several things immediately. They would immediately be struck, well, let's see, then I wasted 12 years in school. I mean, just absolutely, it's not theoretical. I'm an idiot. I might as well have been a bank robber. The hours are better. And you don't have, it wouldn't have cost me $12,000 a year to train to do it. You just buy a gun and go in and say, hey, your life would be gone. But there are other things which even, it's easy to laugh and react to that, but there are even more devious aspects to it. Because the man would also, if he could do it, the psychiatrist or the priest or just the ordinary person that heard that, in my little made-up scene, they would also be stuck with this. That, well, I've wasted my life pursuing what I thought I was pursuing. But worse than that, they would be struck, this can't happen, of course, but they'd be struck that, my God, I don't have any problems. Which, how would that be to waste your life? Wait a minute. You mean here I am now, 45 years old, I've got my own practice, got houses on 2 coasts, wife, a couple of mistresses, good cars. And so what you just told me in some way got in my brain like some kind of wild fungus or virus. And not only have you made me realize that I've wasted my life professionally, my life is ruined because now I've got no life. Well, what do you mean, sir? Well, I'm not sure, but it's like somebody just took some kind of cosmic or psychic toilet paper and just Somebody find it interesting with the more you're dealing with a sophisticated audience, the more you get a reaction if you get past Freud and into bathroom humor that people... Not that it proves anything, but again, because most of you, I think, has some validity, is that probably every one of you have had a touch of that in your own way, and many ordinary people had to do with drugs. It usually didn't happen maybe once or twice and the effect wore off. For many people get it maybe the first time or two with alcohol. But it has literally done to your brain. Pot used to be a great one, and some of the others, but pot was just the strength that most people had it. What it almost did, not literally, but it was close enough, is what made all these drugs always be forever popular and unstampable outable. Is that it almost gives people, and the hallucinogenics, not to discount the even stronger ones that some of you probably had that had a better bankroll than... But it came close, relatively speaking, that it wiped out the kind of neural connections, almost wiped you out. And under the right conditions, it was all very iffy, and I don't mean to make more of it than it was, but enough of you grew up in that kind of generation that the first time you ever had the right kind of hallucinogenic drug, you thought, this is it. I wasted my goddamn life reading all those books on psychology and Buddhism and chanting. This is it. Because and not just leave it with that, but the religious literature throughout the world is replete with this, of people falling into trances, believing that God has talked to them, believing that cosmic forces in some way have come down and just cleared their minds, stilled all of the disturbances, all of the little petty grievances that they thought they had at life. And they try to describe it in this way, which is pretty poetic and sounds nice. But what they're saying is they almost wiped out their partisan thinking, and they were still conscious, and they just didn't really give much of a damn. And that doesn't describe much, and they've tried it other ways, but it's like I could, for a few seconds, or for however long I was in that state, it was almost as though I could look around and I saw people. I saw my sister, my father, my girlfriend, my husband, my good friends. I just looked down the street at strangers, and I saw the damnedest things. Of course, after it's over, if they try to say what, it's just blabber. What was it you saw? Well, I'm not sure, but they're always sure of this. I looked out at life, just at everyday things, and I realized there's a whole bunch of stuff going on that people never see. Give me some more of that. You can't ever do it, and plus if you can do it, you wouldn't accomplish anything if you had to stay in that state, because then you've changed the ball game anyway. It is the neural connections. It is literally, the evidence has been there for 6,000 years. It's there with taking the right kind of mushrooms. It's there, people get on the verge of it, of fasting, torturing themselves, doing all sorts of things. They do it in moments of great stress. There can be a tragedy in their life. And it literally is putting an unnatural, for them, strain on their neural connections. And they look around and forget whether they had any mystical bent to start with. They simply look around and they think, there sure is a whole bunch of stuff going on here just every day that I never see, that no one ever sees. And if you can subtract, if you can delete from that any possible religious connotation, then what are you left with? You're left with the fact that the mechanism by which everyone normally perceives life is wired in, locked in such a way that everyone is tied to the same kind of big collective mind. And for you to say, well, I'm a free thinker. Well, how so, sir? Because I don't believe anything that those other people say. Well, I guess that proves that. I am a free thinker. I'm not tied to bourgeoisie ideas of religion. No, sirree. I'm free. Plus, I don't believe in psychology. Well, that about covered it. Except you know it didn't. The energy that runs life itself at the observable level, discounting drugs and being in an unusual state, It is polarized energy in the same way that the energy that makes your stomach work, your digestive system, that makes the liver operate, that makes the lungs inhale and exhale, that keeps you and humanity alive, that same energy is all that's available here. And it's what I have been calling partisan thought. And it doesn't matter. You would be as foolish to say, if you were to be stuck with the fact that you say, well, a man's got to have opinions, which he does if you're ordinary. And to say, well, a man has got to think this or that. The obvious, or one of the obvious, is to say, well, since you'd agree that you cannot separate your brain literally and your mind from your body. I mean, that's just a figure of speech to us to even do it. Yeah, you're right. Because your daydreams and your belief in having cosmic dreams can be influenced by how many beans you eat or how much cheese you have at night. Yeah, but I don't think about that. Yeah, I know you don't. But at any rate, if you don't believe that partisan thought is necessary, and if you don't believe that it should be open to question, then how about this? Let's take another version of partisan, polarized energy running the human body in toto. Tell me this. Do you have a preference? Would you prefer to inhale or exhale? Now, come on, damn it. A man's got to have an opinion. What are you, some kind of wishy-washy? You mean you don't even have an opinion? It's silly, right? Besides being deadly. But at this level, it does not seem to be silly. And it certainly does not seem to be deadly, which is not, if that's all you're interested in. But how about you can inhale and you can exhale? And you have no preference. Not if you're sane. But you get here. And you say, well, it's a little bit different because there's simply a distinction between thinking that which is true and that which is false, or that which is proper and that which is improper. And may I ask, I hate to be a pushy, but exactly how did you arrive at what is proper to think? Well, that's too obvious. We don't have... That's silly. I mean, anybody knows what's proper to think. Anybody knows what the truth is. I mean, maybe not specifically each and every case, but such as, I mean, when people act weird, when people have problems, I mean, there's some reason for it. Well, sure, there's a reason for it. Are you insinuating there's not a reason? Would you prefer to take in nice, refreshing liquids? Yes. Or would you prefer to evacuate your kidneys? Well, the man's thinking. Plus, I guess he's thinking, are these people nuts? What kind of question is that? Life will only allow the mind to count to two. That is the only energy ordinarily available. Certain kinds of exercise, certain kinds of stress, certain kinds of drugs will almost turn you into a three-eyed creature. And all it is doing is breaking up the kind of polarized neural patterns that are there. The suggestion being, you might be able to do it anyway. We'll leave on a suggestion. That's a suggestion. It's a shadow of a suggestion.